Hello everyone, welcome to Chinatown Gang Stories. Today I'm going to talk about the bus wars and the dollar van wars that was going on back in the 1990s, the late 90s into the early 2000s. I'm still in Hong Kong right now, and later on today I'm going to be heading over to Macau to interview the person who was involved. For those of you who are tuning into this channel for the first time, I was a gang member with the Foot Chain Gang back in 1986 to about 1995 when I was able to join the New York City Police Department, and I served with the New York City Police Department for 26 years before I retired in 2021. I was able to get some of these guys to come on my channel and share some of their experiences and their stories with you. These guys are no longer in the life of crime. They did their time, they came out from prison, and they also turned their life around and they went straight. And that's why they wanted to come on my channel due to my history with them. I remember back then when I was a police officer newly assigned to work in the precinct, and it was probably back around 1996, there was an incident, or maybe 97, where I was doing some plainclothes work. I did plainclothes work a couple of times, or if you listen to some of my previous videos, I went into a prostitution house, plainclothes, as a customer. And then later on, during that operation, we made an arrest. But that's another story. It's not related to this story, but the story that I'm getting at is one time I did a plainclothes operation for a illegal taxi cab. We had a joint operation with the Taxi Limousine Commission, and I was in plainclothes. Of course, I was working for the NYPD, and I was a uniformed member of the service at that time, but then I did plainclothes for that day because I guess there was a complaint from the hospital that was in the confines of the precinct that I worked at. Probably made some complaints about people who were operating as taxi cabs in front of the hospital picking up passengers. And they wasn't registered with the Taxi Limousine Commission. They didn't have TLC plates. So what I did was I posed as a customer, and I got into the taxi cab, and then I tell them where I wanted to go, to the airport, whatever, how much they charge. And then after they drive me for about a block or two, they were pulled over and ultimately either got summonses, or if they didn't have any paperwork, for example, driver license, then they get arrested. So we did an operation like that. Then you fast forward to probably around 97, I would say. Then the dollar van started popping up on 8th Avenue in Brooklyn. It could be before 97, but that was around the time it was popping up. And there was a lot of them around at the time on 8th Avenue. Because these dollar vans, they provide a service for the community. Chinese people in the community felt safer to be in the van rather than taking the train. And it's about the same price. It's not much of a price difference whether you take a train or you jump into one of those dollar vans with passenger plates. Of course, they didn't have TLC plate. They wasn't registered. It was just something that they did. They just bought a van and went up and down the avenue and picked up passengers heading to Chinatown in New York City, Manhattan. So rather than taking the train, customers feel safer going into a van filled with other people in the neighborhood. And they would jump in, and in 20 minutes, with no traffic, 20 minutes, they'll be in Manhattan, Chinatown. And then people from Manhattan, Chinatown who wants to come to Brooklyn, Chinatown would jump into the same van as they're circling around Manhattan, Chinatown, and bring them to 8th Avenue in Brooklyn, Chinatown. So every 20 minutes, they were getting a van load of people, going back and forth between the two Chinatowns. So you figure about in 1 hour they'll be making 3 stops, and if you do the math, I forgot exactly how much it cost, maybe $1.50, $2, but I think it was around close to $2, just a little bit more than what the train fare was back then. If you recall what the train fare was back then, I'm gonna have to ask this guy how much it was, because yeah, I think it's $1 and change, $2. But you do the math. If a van holds, let's say, 12 passengers, some hold 14, and some hold even more, because eventually they found it to be lucrative, and these guys, they went and bought a bigger van to hold more passengers, and then eventually they went to get a minibus to do the same thing. They got a minibus to do it. So if you do the math at $2 a pop, going for every 20 minutes, right? And then in 1 hour, how much can they make? Based on my interviews from the van drivers and the other people, who was involved with this, they told me initially the people who owned these companies, was taking a kickback from them. And how much was the kickback? Originally, it started as a couple of $1,000s. You want to drive, you get your van and you drive under my company, and give us a couple of $1,000s, and eventually that couple of $1,000s went up to $50,000, as high as $50,000. That's how much these guys were making. Basically, they're buying a job, basically, these drivers, so they can work, under that company. And of course, the owner of the company is connected to, the criminal underworld, and these drivers, know that, and that's why they wanted to come up with that money. I mean, you just can't come up with a van and start driving in Chinatown without going through these guys who own the company. Of course, each company have their own connection. Some of these guys, they were making anywhere from $500 to $600, working all day. Of course, you figure a 12-hour day, 15-hour day. I mean, those guys, they work hard. That was my foot post. I was on post, in my uniform, and I see what these guys are doing. They're there all day. Even if I'm doing overtime, I still see them at the beginning of the day to the end at nighttime. They're still there working, hustling and making money. And at that time, it was a lot of money for a driver to make, $500 a day, upwards of $500, and they can actually, pay that $50,000 just to get a job, working for that company. Right. So that's why this type of business attracts a lot of the criminal elements. Anything that's not regulated by the government is, it's prone to attract the criminal underworld. Just like, prostitution, sports betting back then wasn't regulated, marijuana, drugs, all different sort of drugs, and including this. And this is one of the rackets that they had that wasn't regulated, and eventually they cracked down on it, and now you don't see these services anymore in the community. They try to legitimize themselves eventually, but that didn't work out, and we'll touch base on that later. Who was in control? Who was in control of these buses and vans and minibuses? And also, you had buses going out of state, like going to Boston, Chinatown, different Chinatowns outside New York City, and they were making a lot of money too, because it was pretty cheap for you to jump on the bus and go from one Chinatown to another Chinatown. Because why is it so lucrative? It's because the Fujianese community, when they first come to America, a lot of them, they go to these job placement centers that they have in Chinatown, and they would place these guys, find jobs for these guys, and it's mostly outside of New York City. That's why there's a lot of Chinese restaurants. In every state you go, there's a Chinese restaurant. And where do these guys come from? A lot of times they're based out from New York City. They have their family, and maybe their brothers, their sisters, or their wife and kids living in New York City, because we have the highest population of Fujianese over here. And the guy would work out of state. The Fujianese have like every Monday off. Monday is like a day that they like to have off, and a lot of times that's why it's so busy in Chinatown on Mondays, because that's the day that they have off. So sometimes these guys get 1 day off a month, and then they come back to New York City, and that's why these buses are all filled up, because they're dropping these guys off. In the 90s, when I was working, it was all Cantonese, Taiwanese. There were a few Fujianese drivers, but the Fujianese didn't really get into that business until later on, when the Cantonese people and the Taiwanese people started getting out of the business. They were affiliated with the Flying Dragons. And remember, the Flying Dragons, we're not talking about the scientists, back in the 70s, early 80s, and Fox, around the same time. We're not talking about like some of those guys that Kenny served time with, like Ox and Sticks, from the generation from the 80s. We're talking about like the guys later on, from the 90s. And it was after when the Feds picked up the Flying Dragons. There was still remnants of the Flying Dragons around. I guess the younger generation of the Flying Dragons, and these guys wasn't backed up by the hip sing tong. They weren't no more Uncle Seven. They weren't backed up. They were like a local street gang now. Just like a typical local street gang that carried the name Flying Dragons. It was basically all over by then, with the gangs, as we know it, back then. It wasn't. They were already out of their heyday already, like back in the 70s and 80s when they were making the most money. So they were affiliated, and these owners, the owners were not former gangsters, okay? They were associates, okay? They were associates. They knew these gangsters, and based on my experience, a lot of these gangsters, they are not business savvy people. They're out to make a quick buck, okay? So the business savvy, business minded people, the hustlers, I guess, take advantage of this. They befriend these guys because a lot of times they go to school together, they grew up together, and they become friends, and they use these gangsters as the muscle behind their operation. Even back then, the people making the big money were the Tong members, the business owners who were associated with these criminals, gangsters, and they were making the big money. Let me grab a piece of dim sum here. 呢個係咩啊？鹹水角。鹹水角。叫咗未啊？叫咗蝦餃啊嗰啲咩？叫咗啦。紅爪啊嗰啲。Who controlled the whole racket over there? Who had the real power? As I mentioned, they were connected to the Flying Dragons. The owners of these companies. OK， 自己你哋叫攞個公筷嚟。This is chicken feet. This is one of the most popular. This and the ha gao, the shrimp dumpling, and the chicken feet is one of the most popular dim sum dishes. It just got a little bit noisy a while ago. Let me continue. If you check the timeline, this was maybe around the mid-90s, late 90s. That's when these dollar van companies started popping up. And remember, the gangs as we knew it, no longer existed. It was the last of the Mohegans, the remnants of the Flying Dragons, Ghost Shadows, because the FBI picked up everybody already. And the gangs are no longer backed up by the Tongs, or they don't have the international ties like before. They lost a lot of the power. A lot of these hustlers, business owners, and you know what? Some of them even claim to be a former gangster or a gangster, a former Ghost Shadow, Flying Dragon, whatever. And people who didn't know any better fell for it. And they started, opening up these companies and gambling houses, because a lot of these guys went to prison, and they. And there were guys that were still out who knew any better, knew that they were being monitored by the FBI, because the FBI just don't go away. One company, the guy that I'm going to be interviewing when I get to Macau, he had a childhood friend who was a Flying Dragon member. Okay, and of course, this guy was one of the newer Flying Dragons. We're talking about the late 90s now. He was a Flying Dragon member. Of course, he wasn't backed by any Tongs or had any international ties like the the guys from the past, but he still carried the name Flying Dragon. The question is, who had the real power? Who had the power over there? Who had control of the dollar van business, the bus companies? Who had control? You know, was it the gang members, the Flying Dragons? Was it the hustlers and the owners who own these companies? I would have to say no. The real control, the real power is in the hands of the government, the police. I mean, I worked there, and I had a lot of say who stays and who goes. I could have ran the whole show over there if I allow it to happen or not on my post. And that's how much power the police department has. I could have just called the Taxi Limousine Commission and request for like a joint operation and shut these guys down from the get-go. I had that kind of discretion. I address the conditions on my post, and if I think that it's affecting the community in a negative way, then yeah, I will implement that type of action. You can just imagine how much bribery that came my way, the potential for corruption on that post. A lot of things came my way. I had people who tried to bribe me, and there are plenty of stories about that, but I'm not really going to get into that right now. That's for another day. All I can say is that I don't allow people to get close to me that easily. When I was working all those years, you come up, you ask me a question, yeah, I'll answer you on a professional level. But if I sense that you're trying to befriend me or anything, I don't want to know you. And a lot of people tried to get close to me, and it didn't happen. When they come up to me, red flags will automatically go up. For now, I'll just call it Bus Company A and Bus Company B. And so Bus Company A was running this operation, and of course, Company B was the competition. Company B wasn't hooked up to anybody in the criminal underworld. He was a newcomer. He saw the amount of money that was being made. He came in as a newcomer without the blessing of the other companies out there, and he was given a hard time. There was a lot of vandalism on his vehicles. There were some assaults. He always come to the precinct to make these police reports about the incidents that happened to him. And of course, the NYPD is not really going to investigate a flat tire. If there's no eyewitness, cameras wasn't prevalent back in those days. There's no evidence. They're just going to close the case. Eventually, the cases started piling up. The reports started piling up, and I knew there wasn't really much we can do about it. Of course, I sent the word out there. I said, this is going to be bad for everybody. If you guys continue doing it the way you're doing it. Eventually, the reports start piling up, and that's when the police department took notice. The higher ups took notice, and they needed to take action. And that's when they requested for TLC, Taxi Limousine Commission, to come down and do the crackdown on these illegal dollar vans with passenger plates. And TLC came down. They issued a lot of tickets, but for them, they were making so much money. It didn't matter to them. They just pay the ticket, they pay the fine, and they go about their business again. Company A will come up and ask me for advice on how to handle certain things, and of course I kept it professional, and these guys know I always keep it professional. And as the Company B try to befriend me and asking me for advice on how to go about it, and I'm getting it from the both sides. How I see these guys, the guy from Company A, I see him as he wasn't gangster. He was a hustler, but he has some connection. He wasn't made out to be a gangster. I don't think he could ever be a gangster with his personality. He's not the aggressive enough, violent enough. I mean, that's based on my experience in the streets. And the owner of Company B, he reminds me of that movie, the guy, the villain in the movie Zhou Yunfat, A Better Tomorrow. He reminds me of that guy. The second I had conversation with him and I size him up, you know, that's the feeling I got. Like, to me, he could say anything you want to hear, and then he could be a real snake. So basically, that's the vibe I got from these two guys, you know, from just dealing with them. And the guy from Company B asked me, oh, you know, I'm doing all these reports and the police department is not doing anything about it. You know, what should I do about it? I know that what he's saying is true. The police department really can't do much about it because it's just a criminal misreport. Yeah, you have a dozen of them, and if you can't prove it, you have no witness. And basically, I said, you know, our hands are tied. You know, we're limited on what we can do as far as the resources conduct, you know, these long-term investigations. I said, you know, just take it to the FBI. And guess what? And that's exactly what he did. And even to this day, the guy from Company A didn't know it was on account of my advice that got him shipped out. The unwritten street rules no longer apply anymore. How Chinatown was back then, as I knew it in the 70s, 80s, and it no longer applies. You know, it's like everyone for themselves. Money talks. There's no more like honor, principle, or anything like that. I mean, when it comes to these hustlers out there, they no longer respect the gangsters because. So we're talking about someone who's a businessman, who's a hustler, who has really no ties to the underworld. You know what he does? He used law enforcement to get what he wants. He used law enforcement as a pawn to take out all the competition, and then eventually he made it big. And this guy made it big. He made it so big that just even his lackey, his gopher, or you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, was making 20 to 30 grand a month. And back in those days, it's a lot of money. I actually knew that guy that was helping him run the show. I'm just giving you a preview of what happened based on my observations and what I saw, and then later on, you're gonna hear it from the person who was actually involved, what he did, who he sought out, you know, what he did to the vehicles, and how he ultimately got caught, and how they got the evidence to charge him with extortion. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chinatown Gang Stories. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Tommy Q. I call him Tommy Q. He's an old associate, old friend of mine. We go way back in the 1990s, and he was previously arrested for the incident with the dollar van and the bus wars in New York City's Chinatown. He was arrested by the FBI. That was back in 1998, and he's going to fill us in on what really happened, you know, behind the scenes. All right, so welcome to the channel, Tommy. Tommy is going to speak in Cantonese, and I am going to translate it into English as best as I can. I will be asking him some questions in Cantonese, and we'll go from there. All right. So Tommy， 你嗰件事咧係點樣發生㗎？
嗰件事咧發生咧就係96年啊，96年、97年，我喺度揸嗰啲van仔，就寶輪八大道到唐人街，咁咧就98年嗰時咧就係爭嗰啲停車位，爭嗰啲 parking， 咁你拍第一個位咧生意好啲咯，拍後邊啊第二、第三、第四個位嗰啲生意冇咁好咯，冇咁好嘅。
I already know the story. He already told me what happened and the whole story behind it. Let me explain what the situation was back then. It was in 1996 when he started his company, and the whole war between all the other companies was based on parking. There was no designated parking area for these dollar vans and minibuses. It was like whoever gets there, first come, first serve. And there were some spots in Chinatown that I guess more pedestrian traffic, and the space was more desirable. And whoever got that space had the most customers. It was at the front of the line, in the front of the corner of what Bao guy, Mat guy, 最好嘅地方。
Canal 街同埋乜街
Canal Street and Mott Street was the most desirable place to park, especially at the corner. The line forms all the way down the block. So whoever had the first spot, the first space, the corner space, that's where the customers go in first because they figure there's a line there, so they're all gonna head over to the first vehicle that's there. And there were many different companies at that time. 有幾多間公司啊嗰陣時？
嗰時有牌嗰啲啊，有4間、4間。
There were about 4 to 5 different companies at that time.
冇牌嗰啲有6、7間。
And then maybe about 6 or 7 unlicensed. What he mean by unlicensed is the dollar vans with the passenger plates. And what he meant by license is the vans with the TLC plates. I would consider them all unlicensed because they're not allowed to operate like that, like a yellow taxi cab with the medallion. They're not allowed to do street pickups anyway. But they all figured they don't know the rules, the Taxi Limousine Commission regulations, so they figured they get TLC plates and they're able to, act like a yellow taxi cab. The war was all about the parking spaces. Over the years, I remember they approached me, a lot of these company owners and drivers. I was working my beat at that time, and I was a cop already. I was in the academy from '95. I graduated in '96, and I was posted there around that time in Brooklyn's Chinatown, and that's where these vans were shuttling the people from one Chinatown to another. I was approached a lot by many of these guys, including him. I always gave my professional advice. I always maintained professionalism with them. They all know, most of them know about me. I guess word from the street. Maybe some of them knew my background. He wasn't in the U.S. that long to know my background. I guess some of the other owners of the place know what my background was about. I mean, 你幾時嚟美國係90幾年啊？
今年
He came to U.S. in 1995, and he left the U.S. around 2000年, right?
Yeah.
Around 2000. After he served his time, he got picked up by the FBI around 1998. He was one of the early participants in the van business, the dollar van business, because after he got picked up, after 1998, those guys were making a lot of money. They were making a lot of money. These early dollar vans paved the way for the people to make that kind of money later on. So he went to his friend, who's a Flying Dragon member, to take care of business, and he agreed. I guess they were friends. They knew each other, and the guy offered to help him. So the Flying Dragon member sent a couple of young kids, fellow gang members, to threaten the drivers on that block who was parked on that block. There were a couple of spaces where these vehicles parked. One was on Canal Street, corner of Mott Street. Then there were other places on Bowery Street, right? Yeah. Bowery Street, and then maybe on East Broadway, right? So they were like scattered all over the place. But the most desirable place was the one on Canal in the corner of Mott. So the Flying Dragon member went over there and threatened the driver. Over the course of time, the driver who was still there, who didn't listen, got assaulted. After the assault, the competition reported to the FBI. According to him, his speculation is that
我當時咧就咁嘅，當係即係大家我朋友識嘅，咁佢係喺飛龍仔嚟嘅，咁我即係同佢傾下，即係俾翻啲飲茶錢佢，即係一個月俾翻啲多少飲茶錢，你係撐我 ，help me。
So he went to pay the Flying Dragon member to, I guess, protect his interests. 咁之後咧，咁佢就打佢嗰班人打嗰個司機，咁後尾嗰個老細就
報警。
Okay, so the other owner reported to the police after the assault, and then 你哋個個一齊坐低，咁啲錢係點樣交轉俾飛龍仔？
我哋交錢咧就係錢咧，我交俾飛龍仔，因為我哋司機咧就一個人咧每個月咧即係夾啲錢出嚟，咁啊俾我就俾個飛龍仔當係我朋友當係俾佢飲茶咁嘅。
Okay.
咁樣嘅對方公司咧就報警咧就因為嗰啲我朋友就叫啲僆仔去恐嚇你司機，叫人哋你冇泊呢度，泊呢度我就揼你㗎啦。
OK，咁報咗警咧，嗰陣時咧就
報咗警啊，佢 FBI 就 set up 嘅。
set up 係點樣 set up 嘅？俾我哋。
佢個 FBI 就教嗰、個即係另外對方嘅公司咧，就要拍嗰啲視頻，跟住有錄音。呢啲 FBI 全部有錄音啊，有視頻。
冇交錢俾個 OK， 即係冇交錢俾佢。
咁咧就
錄咗音。
就錄音。咁錄音咧，有冇交錢我其實都唔知道。當係嗱請你哋食飯啦，你唔好再嚇我哋司機啊，唔好再搞佢哋啦。咁我俾啲錢你當你係飲茶。咁就呢件事就算啦，好唔好？就咁樣嘅。
Okay, I got it. His company and all the drivers of his company pitched in the money together to give it to the Flying Dragon member, who in turn distributed to his gang members to take care of his interests. Then his competition called the FBI because when he threatened the drivers, he mentioned that he was a gang member with the Flying Dragons. So automatically, the FBI is going to build a case on that. Organized crime. I guess the FBI had the drivers wired up, and the owner, the competition, his competition wired up, and the FBI told them to continue parking, continue doing what they're doing, and the Flying Dragon members continue with the threats, and the competition, the owner, went up to him and offered him money just to leave him alone, and to apologize to him. $800 was handed over to him supposedly. According to him, that's how the FBI built the case. He got arrested, as well as the Flying Dragon member who orchestrated it, and his 2 other gang mates. So a total of 4 people, 4個人，大約係咪？
加埋我5個。
Oh, total of 5 people. Total of 5 people arrested. So I guess 3 of his gang members, including the Flying Dragon, who orchestrated it, and actually the Flying Dragon member who orchestrated it got the most amount of time. He wound up getting 20 months, right? 20個月。
Yeah, over 20 months.
Yeah, he took the plea for 20 months. Otherwise, it would have been probably 10 years, right? You're looking at 10 years, right?
Say up to 10.
Yeah, up to 10 years. He was already in the system for 16 months when he took the plea, did a couple more months, and when he got released from Otisville, he went to immigration, and then from there he got deported, and he's been in China ever since for the last 20 somewhat years. So that's the story behind it.
其實我害咗好似覺得我個朋友雖然係 game， 雖然佢係黑，即係出去行古惑嘅，但係佢錢又冇收到，我連累埋佢坐監仲要咁，即係。
Yeah, so he felt guilty, feel bad because the Flying Dragon member helped him out and wound up getting arrested, serving his time, and also got deported to Fuzhou. He was Fujianese, right? 福州人。
福州人。
你係台山人？
唔係，我係廣州人，花都嘅。
Oh, okay, so he's Cantonese from Guangdong, and the Flying Dragon member was Fujianese. Fujianese Flying Dragon.
係我去叫個朋友幫手嘅，即係覺得好似我連累咗佢咁咯。有時覺得，即係佢叫佢幫手，即係叫對方唔好拍嗰度啊，想攞個頭位去拍啊咁。佢錢又冇收到，係咪？錢又冇收到，又連累埋佢坐監就係咁，我覺得。
Yeah.
但係意思即係話，我本嚟每個月要俾幾百蚊俾個朋友呢邊，都係飲茶食飯。
哦，都未有機會俾佢。
都冇有機會俾人拉咗啦。啱啱講好1個嘅星期2個星期俾人拉咗啦，錢都冇收到，俾人拉咗啦就咁。
What he's saying is he feels really bad that he got that Flying Dragon. He's not going to mention his name, but he got that. It was because he feel like it's his fault getting the Flying Dragon member arrested. The drivers were going to pull together the money and give it to the Flying Dragon, but that never got to happen because the FBI picked him up by that time. And he feel really bad about it, even to this day. It's something he has to live with. I mean, the guy was willing to help him out. I mean, in the old days they may work, but not during that time. By that time, the gangs as we know it, it was all over. Back then, if you were a Flying Dragon, member backed by the Tongs, and you had the connection, international connection, like some of these guys back then had. People like the community, would respect like certain unwritten rules in Chinatown. Yeah, after the FBI took them all down, they didn't get the same respect anymore. And he didn't know. He just came to this country. At that time, he just came in 1996. So what does he know? I guess the Flying Dragon member was eager to help him and got himself into that mess. And he feels guilty about it even to this day. And since he's been back in China, they met a couple of times. They bumped into each other a couple of times, and I guess they still keep in touch. Yeah, 都仲有聯絡咩？
有啲有聯絡。
Yeah, still keep in touch. It's a different game that they play after the mid-90s. You want to get rid of the competition, use law enforcement, use them as the pawn. And that's what the people are doing since then. Check out the article about this guy named Cash. These are some of the tactics that they use. They use the law enforcement to get rid of the competition so they can reap the profits. That's why after 1998, the competition were making so much money. As I stated earlier, they were making a killing. They were bidding up these prices to like $50,000 for the route eventually, and one of the owners, the guy's lackey, gopher, whatever you want to call it, his minion, was making about 20 to 30,000 a month in cash. So you can imagine what these guys are making back then with this business. This guy, he started it from the beginning, the early stages of it, a dozen companies. So you can imagine how many customers were going out to Chinatown, zipping back and forth to Chinatown from the 2-3 Chinatowns all day long. Eventually they had that line to go to Flushing as well. A lot of money involved. Yeah. 嗰時有成10幾間總共位都10幾間，每一間有幾多個？
每一間有啲多啲，有啲幾部車啊，有啲係10部8部車，我哋都係10部8部車。
咁又細嗰啲咧？
細嗰啲都係啲幾部車啊。
So you figure, let's say about a dozen companies out there, on the average, because like for example, his company has about 8 to 10 vehicles, and the other companies, smaller companies, maybe a couple, 4 or 5. A lot of vans out there, zipping around. A lot of competition at that time, but there was money to be made for everybody. And then eventually, how do you get rid of the competition? Use the FBI. Use law enforcement. A lot of them had passenger plates, then call TLC, use the government, get rid of them. And that's what they did. They called TLC, they call anybody they can to get rid of the competition, and then those remaining, they were left with the meat, the fat piece of meat, making all the money. And then this guy got the short end of the stick. If you enjoy these type of stories, please hit the like and subscribe button. Put it in the comment section if you want to hear more from this guy, any other details that you would like to know. Thank you for following this channel. And also I'd like to give a shout out to my production team. They put in a lot of work and time into making these videos better, visually and audio wise. So again, I like to thank everybody for subscribing to this channel and being loyal and keeping the comments respectful. That's all I'm asking for. And until next time, take care. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you for coming and sharing the story with us. Anytime you want to hear from Tommy, let me know. I can always reach out to him, ask him the questions that any of my subscribers may have. All right. Thank you. Until next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye from Macau.
Here it is. You see this?
Yeah. I won my battle. I finished battle in my shadow. Yeah. I shot my arrow. It's time to think it over. I had to. Yeah. I touched that ladder. It didn't really fucking like matter. Yeah. I watched them gather. Yeah. Cause 92 is when it all shattered. Yeah. Born and bred, BK. One door, get paid. Move work. catchphrase. What more can I say? Be first in battle. Trust me, life matters. Raised up, no father, more like a Chinatown guy. Go shadow. I won my battle. And bitches battle in my shadow. I shot my arrow. It's time to take it over, I had to. I touched that ladder. It didn't really fucking like matter. I watched them gather. Cause 92 is when it all shattered.